Jonathan walked slowly, feeling the rhythm of his own steps match the rhythm of the world around him. Step by step, breath by breath, the road seemed endless, yet comforting, as if it had always been waiting for him. He could hear the soft chirping of birds somewhere high above, their calls echoing like tiny bells in the calm air. A breeze brushed his cheek, cool and tender, as if it were greeting him, reminding him of life's small, gentle movements. The trees leaned slightly, their leaves rustling, a gentle applause for his journey. Even the sunlight seemed to follow him, dipping behind clouds only to return again, like a slow, lazy dance across the sky. The village he had left behind lay far behind him now, small and quiet in the distance. Its roofs were little islands in a sea of green, the smoke from chimneys curling softly into the evening air. There, people moved slowly, unaware of the distant hills that stretched beyond their familiar world. Jonathan's heart carried a quiet excitement, a soft curiosity that hummed in his chest. Ahead of him lay the unknown. Ahead of him lay the promise of something remarkable. And somewhere among the hills, hidden just beyond sight, lay the castle he had heard about in whispered tales, a place both ancient and strange, a place that seemed to breathe quietly in the evening mist. He walked, and the road seemed to guide him. Every stone, every rise in the earth, every patch of moss or shade of grass whispered, "This way, this way." The gentle sway of the trees, the low hum of insects hidden in the grass, all blended into a soothing, rhythmic music. He imagined the road itself was alive, breathing softly, carrying him forward. Yet beneath the gentle rhythm, a small pulse of curiosity stirred. What awaited him at the end of this winding path? What stories had these hills held, quietly waiting, for years, decades, perhaps centuries? Even the shadows were soft now, stretching long across the path, brushing his feet like delicate hands. The hills rolled endlessly, not threatening, but welcoming, like a lullaby that promised rest and wonder. As he walked, Jonathan let his mind drift, noticing the way the sky changed color as the sun sank lower, painting streaks of pink and orange that rippled across the clouds. Each color seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heart, a quiet reminder that the world was vast, yet gentle, and he was part of it. The closer he came to the distant mountains, the more the air smelled of something old and rich, something waiting and ancient. The scent was subtle, barely there, like a memory that floats just beyond the edge of sleep. Jonathan's steps slowed, not out of fear, but out of respect, as if the land itself deserved quiet attention. The birds grew silent, leaving only the soft sound of the wind weaving through the valleys. Even the sun, which had lingered so warmly, dipped slowly behind the hills, leaving a gentle twilight in its place. In the distance, a shape began to appear, rising from the folds of the hills like a dream made solid. A castle. Its towers seemed to shimmer in the fading light, edges softened by distance and mist. Jonathan's chest tightened, not with anxiety, but with the wonder of approaching something old, something filled with stories that had yet to be told. Each tower seemed to pulse gently with the fading sun, as if breathing slowly, keeping its own rhythm in time with the world around it. The road now curved sharply, following the natural rise of the hills, and Jonathan felt a slight thrill as he realized the castle was nearer than before. He could see its walls, made of stone so gray it seemed silver in the twilight. Ivy clung to them, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. The windows were dark, yet the castle itself seemed calm, waiting patiently. Step by step, breath by breath, he moved closer, feeling the quiet anticipation that filled the air. And then he noticed something he hadn't before. A faint flicker of movement in one of the upper windows. It was brief, almost like a trick of the fading light, but enough to make his pulse quicken softly. Nothing stirred on the path behind him, nothing except the gentle wind. Yet for a moment, Jonathan felt a whisper of unease, a soft nudge of curiosity. Who or what could be watching from that quiet, distant window? Along the way, he passed a small stream, its waters singing softly over smooth stones. Jonathan paused, letting the sound settle into his mind. The stream was gentle, playful, inviting him to linger, to rest, to breathe in the quiet magic of the land. He knelt for a moment, letting his fingers brush the cool water, feeling its rhythm echo through his hands. Every ripple seemed to murmur, "You are here! You are here! You are safe!" Yet even in that safety, the castle's shadow lingered in the corner of his thoughts, like a question he could not yet answer. As he continued, the road narrowed, flanked by tall trees that leaned over gently, forming a soft canopy of green and gold. Shafts of twilight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the earth, flickering gently as if the forest itself were breathing. Jonathan's steps became slower, more measured. The castle grew larger, more detailed with each step. Its towers reached upward, not threatening, but welcoming, promising stories and discoveries just beyond the walls. The castle gates came into view, tall, ancient, and quietly imposing. They were closed now, yet there was no sense of danger, only a serene patience, as if the gates themselves waited to see who would arrive. Jonathan approached, feeling a calm resolve settle over him. The stones beneath his feet were smooth, worn by countless footsteps over countless years, and each step seemed to connect him to all who had walked here before. Above him, the first stars began to glimmer in the deepening sky. They twinkled softly, like tiny beacons guiding him forward, their gentle light reflecting in his eyes. The world around him had slowed, each moment stretching like soft silk. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of earth, stone, and ivy, letting it fill his chest, letting it calm every thought. He was here. He had arrived. And yet, as his hand brushed the gate, a faint sound reached his ears. A soft click, almost like a whisper from somewhere deep within the castle. It was not loud, not alarming, just a sound that made him pause. Step by step, breath by breath, he sensed that the castle had noticed him, that it had been waiting quietly for someone to arrive. And now, with the final ray of sun slipping behind the hills, the gate before him seemed almost alive, inviting him to step inside. Jonathan took a breath, steady and slow. He felt the rhythm of the castle in his bones, the rhythm of the night in his soul, the rhythm of the world in every heartbeat. And then, with a soft creak and a gentle push, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the unknown. Inside, the air was cool and still. Shadows stretched along the walls, flickering softly in the fading twilight. And somewhere, just beyond the corner of the hallway, a door slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to open.
Chapter 2: The Castle's Whisper. The castle seemed alive. Its walls breathed slowly, exhaling cool air into the twilight, brushing Jonathan's face as he stepped carefully across the smooth stones. Every sound was gentle, yet it carried a quiet meaning. A distant drip of water echoed softly, and somewhere above, a bird's quiet call lingered in the shadowed halls. Jonathan's footsteps made no sound on the stone floor, yet he felt as if the castle itself could sense him, tracking him with a silent awareness that was neither threatening nor frightening, only curious. The main hall stretched high above him, its ceiling lost in soft shadows. Shafts of fading light filtered through the tall, narrow windows, painting gentle stripes on the floor like golden ribbons. Jonathan noticed the faint scent of old wood and polished stone, the faint, almost imperceptible aroma of something sweet, like flowers long past bloom. It wrapped around him, soothing, calming, drawing his mind into a slow, gentle rhythm, like the swing of a cradle. He moved slowly, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingers as he touched the walls. Each touch seemed to hum softly, as if the stones remembered every person who had walked here before and whispered their stories in quiet echoes. Jonathan imagined the voices, soft and distant, like the faintest hum of a lullaby, telling of travelers, of quiet days, of nights spent in reflection. Step by step, he moved forward, letting the rhythm of his own heartbeat match the rhythm of the castle itself. A spiral staircase rose before him, winding upward into shadows that shimmered in the dim light. Jonathan paused at its base, feeling a soft pull toward the unknown. Something awaited him above, he knew. Something ancient and patient. He climbed slowly, step by step, listening to the quiet scrape of his shoes against the stone. The staircase seemed endless, curling upward like a spiral of time itself. Each step brought a soft sense of anticipation, a gentle tickle of curiosity that made his chest hum quietly. At last, he reached the top, and a long hallway stretched before him. The walls were lined with old tapestries, their colors muted but still glowing faintly in the twilight. Patterns of trees, rivers, and distant lands shifted gently as Jonathan's eyes lingered, almost hypnotic in their detail. He moved slowly, his hands brushing the fabric, feeling the textures under his fingers, and each touch seemed to bring him closer, deeper, into the heart of the castle's quiet magic. A faint draft whispered through the corridor, carrying with it the soft scent of the outside night, cool air, wet earth, and a hint of something older, hidden and waiting. Jonathan's senses sharpened gently, like a slow awakening from a deep dream. He felt the rhythm of the castle in his chest, in the soft pulse of the air, in the quiet breath of the halls. It was a rhythm that asked nothing of him, yet invited everything: attention, curiosity, wonder. He reached a large door at the end of the hallway. Its wood was polished and smooth, yet darkened with age, and iron hinges gleamed faintly where the last rays of sunlight caught them. Jonathan's hand hovered over the doorknob, and a shiver, soft and almost imperceptible, ran through him. He turned the knob slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in the soft glow of twilight from a high, narrow window. Inside, the air was cooler, filled with the soft scent of parchment and candle wax. A desk sat against the far wall, papers neatly stacked, as if someone had only just left. Jonathan's eyes traced the room, noticing the subtle details: a faintly carved chair, the gentle folds of curtains that swayed with the draft, and the quiet shimmer of dust in the light. Everything was still, yet filled with a presence he could not see, a presence that seemed to breathe slowly along with the castle. He moved closer to the desk, his fingertips brushing the smooth wood. On the papers lay delicate handwriting, looping and careful, full of gentle curves that seemed almost musical. Jonathan leaned closer, reading a few words softly, as if speaking them aloud would disturb the rhythm of the room. The words told of distant lands, of travelers' tales, of secrets kept for years, waiting patiently for someone who would understand. He felt a quiet thrill of discovery, a soft pulse of anticipation. Then a sudden sound, a soft, almost whispered sigh, echoed through the room. Jonathan froze, his ears strained, catching the faintest movement, the softest echo. Nothing appeared in the shadows, yet the air seemed to hum as if the room itself were alive, watching, listening, and waiting. A small shiver ran down his spine, gentle and strange, like the echo of a dream brushing against waking thought. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the calm rhythm of the castle settle him again. With careful steps, he turned and moved toward a doorway on the opposite wall, drawn by a gentle pull he could not explain. Beyond it lay a corridor darker than the one he had left, narrower, lined with tapestries whose design seemed to shift ever so slightly in the corner of his eye. Jonathan felt the quiet pulse of curiosity rise within him, urging him forward. The castles seemed to murmur softly, "Step closer, step closer. There is more to see." At the end of the corridor, a small spiral staircase descended into darkness. Jonathan paused, listening. From below came a soft, echoing sound, almost like water dripping onto stone, yet distant and rhythmic. Each drop seemed measured, deliberate, keeping time with the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. He felt no fear, only fascination, a gentle wonder that pulled him softly down the stairs, one careful step at a time. The staircase opened into a lower hall, wide and shadowed. The air here was cooler still, carrying the faint scent of earth and stone, of things long hidden. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering gently, though no one had lit them. The room seemed to glow softly in their presence, casting dancing shadows that stretched and recoiled in time with the slow rhythm of the castle. Jonathan moved forward, his hands brushing the walls, feeling the quiet energy that seemed to hum in every stone, every corner, every shadow. Then he saw it, a door at the far end of the hall, slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. From it came a soft, slow sound, a whisper so gentle it might have been imagined. A sigh, a shuffle, a movement that made the shadows sway as if alive. Jonathan's breath slowed, deep and steady, as his mind focused on the sound. He felt the rhythm of the castle deepen around him, as if it were urging him onward, step by step, toward the door, toward the unknown that waited just beyond. He approached slowly, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips, listening to the quiet pulse of air and shadow. Each step was measured, each breath drawn with care, matching the gentle rhythm of the castle. The door beckoned softly, a quiet invitation, whispering of secrets that had been waiting for centuries. Jonathan's heart hummed with anticipation, a gentle thrill that was both calming and exciting, like the feeling of stepping into a half-remembered dream. And just as he reached the doorway, a shadow moved across the floor behind the door, subtle and fleeting, almost like a trick of the light. Jonathan paused, his hand hovering over the edge of the door. The shadow lingered, just long enough for him to feel it, then disappeared into the deeper darkness. A soft sigh followed it, almost like a whisper. "You have come. You have come." Jonathan felt the pull of curiosity stronger than ever. He had come this far, drawn by the gentle rhythm of the castle and the quiet magic of the night. And now, with the shadow moving just beyond the doorway, he knew that
Chapter 3. The Man in the Shadows. The door opened with a sigh. Soft air drifted from the darkness beyond, cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of dust and age. Jonathan stepped forward slowly, his hand brushing the smooth frame as if to steady himself. The air inside the room felt different, older, stiller, as though time itself paused when he entered. A faint light flickered somewhere deep within the shadows, a small flame trembling on a distant wall. It seemed to dance gently, not with fear, but with patience, waiting for him to come closer. Each step Jonathan took echoed softly, as if the walls were listening, as if every sound mattered. His heart moved in quiet rhythm with his breath, slow, steady, calm. The room revealed itself bit by bit. There was a long table of dark wood,
its surface smooth and shining faintly in the candlelight. Tall chairs stood beside it, carved with patterns of leaves and stars. At the far end, where the shadows deepened into twilight, a figure sat quietly, almost still, as if carved from the same darkness that surrounded him. Jonathan's steps slowed. He could not see the man's face at first, only the shape of his hands resting gently on the table. One of them lifted slightly, a graceful movement, like a slow wave through still water. And then a voice, low, calm, and smooth as silk, filled the space between them. "Welcome," the voice said. "You have come far." The tone was not unkind. It carried weight, yes, but also a strange warmth, like a lullaby sung in a forgotten language. Jonathan bowed slightly, unsure why, but it felt right. "Thank you," he said softly. "I hope I have not come too late in the day." A pause. The sound of the wind touched the windows, whispering faintly like the sigh of a sleeping child. Then the figure leaned forward, and Jonathan saw his face. It was pale, smooth, and calm, ageless in a way that was not youthful, but eternal. His eyes were dark, deep as still water, reflecting the candlelight like twin mirrors. His lips curved in a faint smile, polite, knowing. "You are welcome in my home," he said. "I am the Count." The words hung softly in the air, not sharp, not grand, but steady, as though they had been spoken many times before. Jonathan inclined his head again, his voice gentle. "Count Dracula, I presume." The Count nodded slowly. His movements were graceful, precise, like those of someone who had lived long enough to understand the beauty of slowness. He gestured to a chair, and Jonathan sat, feeling the smooth wood cool beneath his hands. For a while neither spoke. The candlelight flickered softly between them, painting small golden shapes on the walls. From somewhere deep within the castle came a soft sound, perhaps the closing of a door, or the whisper of the wind moving through distant halls. The Count's gaze drifted toward the sound, then back to Jonathan, his expression unchanged. "You must be tired," the Count said quietly. "The journey through the mountains can be long, and the nights here are not like others." His voice carried a rhythm, calm and slow, as though each word had been chosen from a dream. Jonathan nodded, feeling his eyes heavy, his body relaxed by the steady pace of the Count's voice. "Yes," he murmured, "it was long, but beautiful. The hills, the air, they felt alive." The Count's eyes gleamed softly. "Everything here breathes," he said, "even the silence." For a moment they simply sat together in that silence, listening. It was true. The air itself seemed alive, whispering softly through the old stone, humming a melody too ancient to name. Jonathan felt no fear, only curiosity, only the strange calm of being somewhere that seemed untouched by time. "Tell me," said the Count, his tone still gentle, "did you notice anything unusual on your way here? Anything unexpected?" Jonathan thought for a moment. He remembered the flicker in the castle window,
the soft sigh behind the door, the whisper of voices in the walls. But the memories felt distant now, like dreams fading in the morning light. "Only the beauty of the land," Jonathan said at last, "and the silence. It feels different here." The Count smiled faintly, though his eyes did not change. "Yes, the silence here is deep. It remembers." Then, with a graceful movement, he rose from his chair. His height was striking, though his steps made no sound as he crossed the floor. He moved to a tall cabinet against the wall, where crystal bottles glimmered faintly in the candlelight. Without turning, he spoke again, his voice low and even. "You must eat and rest. I will have a room prepared for you." Jonathan began to speak, but the Count lifted a hand, still without looking back. "There will be time for questions. For now, breathe. The castle is old, and it listens to newcomers. It must learn your rhythm." Those words echoed in Jonathan's mind as the Count returned, moving as quietly as mist. He placed a glass before him, the liquid inside dark and still, catching the candlelight like deep red silk. "Drink," the Count said. "It will warm you." Jonathan hesitated only a moment before lifting the glass. The scent was rich, old, and strange, yet soothing in a way he could not explain. He drank slowly, feeling warmth spread through him, soft and steady, filling every corner of his tired body. When he looked up, the Count was watching him with that same faint smile, calm and unreadable. "You see, this house welcomes those who listen, those who walk slowly, who breathe with care. You will sleep well here." And with that, he turned away, his shadow stretching long and thin against the far wall. Jonathan sat for a moment, letting the calm settle over him. The warmth from the drink pulsed gently through his chest, matching the rhythm of the flickering candles. Outside he could hear the faint hum of the wind, the heartbeat of the castle continuing in slow rhythm. He turned back once more, his expression unchanged. "When you are ready," he said, "follow the candlelight down the hall. Your room awaits." Jonathan rose, feeling the weight of travel slip away. He nodded in gratitude, and the Count inclined his head in return. Then Jonathan stepped back into the hallway, where the torches burned softly, their flames bending slightly, as if they bowed when he passed. The corridor stretched before him, long and winding, each step carrying him deeper into the rhythm of the castle. Each door he passed whispered softly as he went by, tiny sighs of wood and metal, as though the house was greeting him or remembering him. At the far end, one door stood open. A candle burned inside, its flame steady, waiting. Jonathan entered, feeling the warmth of the small room wrap him around like a blanket. The bed was simple but soft, the air touched with lavender and smoke. He sat for a moment, watching the flame of the candle sway gently, its light golden and calm. Outside, he could hear the faint hum of the wind, the heartbeat of the castle continuing in slow rhythm. He lay down, the sheets cool against his skin, his body sinking into rest. But as his eyes began to close, the flame of the candle flickered, and for a moment, just before sleep claimed him, he thought he saw a shape move across the room. A long shadow, tall, thin, and silent. It moved past the wall, toward the window, then disappeared. Jonathan's breath slowed, the warmth in his chest deepened, his mind drifted, and somewhere in the castle, far below, a door closed softly, sealing the night.
Chapter 4: The First Night in the Castle. The castle dreamed. Its walls breathed in and out with the rhythm of the wind, the air shifting through secret cracks like the sigh of an old, remembering soul. Jonathan lay in the bed, half awake, half drifting, his body heavy and warm beneath the smooth sheets. The candle on the small table had burned low, its flame now small and trembling, painting the walls with soft, sleepy light. The room itself seemed to hum faintly, as if whispering a lullaby only the castle knew. He could hear the slow pulse of silence, the heartbeat of stone, the breath of the night. Each sound was gentle, the rustle of the curtains, the quiet creak of wood, the far-off call of an unseen bird. Nothing sharp, nothing loud, just layers of calm that rolled over one another like soft waves. Jonathan's thoughts floated. He thought of the Count's voice, low and steady, every word like a note in a long song that seemed to continue even now, echoing through the walls. He could almost hear it, faint and distant. "You will sleep well here." And he did feel it, an odd peace, heavy and deep, pressing softly on his mind. The candle flickered once, then again. Jonathan turned his head toward it, watching the flame dance and bow as if greeting something unseen. He smiled sleepily. "Just the wind," he whispered, though the windows were closed. But as the light wavered, it revealed something on the wall, something faint, soft and shifting, a shadow, long and thin, moving not with the flame, but against it. Jonathan blinked, unsure if his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. He watched the wall. The shadow bent slowly, stretching toward the floor, then faded as the candle steadied. He took a slow, calm breath. "Dreams," he murmured. "It's only dreams." He lay back again, closing his eyes. The bed felt impossibly soft, the air cool against his face. He let his thoughts drift like smoke, curling gently through the quiet dark. Time passed. Minutes or hours, he could not tell. The rhythm of the castle pulsed softly around him, like the rise and fall of the sea. Then, from somewhere beyond the door, he heard it, a faint sound, low and musical, like humming, a voice, gentle and far away. It came from beyond the door, soft as silk, carrying a tune that had no words. Jonathan listened, barely breathing. The melody was slow, strange and beautiful,
like the lullabies of childhood half remembered in sleep. He couldn't tell whether it came from the hall or from the very stones themselves. It seemed to drift from everywhere, from nowhere. He rose slowly, every movement heavy, as though he were moving under water. The floor was cool beneath his feet. He crossed the room, his hand reaching for the door handle. The humming grew a little louder, clearer, yet still soft, an invitation more than a call. He opened the door. The hallway beyond glowed faintly in the moonlight that spilled through tall windows. The air was cool and smooth, filled with the quiet scent of rain, though no rain had fallen. Jonathan stepped into the corridor, the sound of the humming now floating gently ahead of him, leading him on. He walked slowly, his fingertips brushing the walls as he passed. The stone felt warm, almost alive, as if the castle were guiding him. The torches had gone out, yet the moonlight was enough to see by, silver and soft, turning every surface into dream. The song led him down a staircase, the steps curving gracefully downward into the quiet heart of the castle. The air grew cooler as he descended, and the sound of the voice grew clearer, more tender. It was no longer just humming now. He thought he could hear words, faint and in a language he did not know. The syllables rolled like water, calm and endless. At the base of the stairs, Jonathan entered a great hall he hadn't seen before. Tall pillars reached toward the ceiling like sleeping giants. The air shimmered with a thin silver mist, glowing faintly in the moonlight. And there, at the far end of the hall, stood a figure. She was pale as moonlight, her gown soft and flowing as water. Her hair drifted around her like mist, moving though there was no wind. Jonathan stopped, his breath catching softly in his chest, not from fear, but wonder. The woman turned her head slowly toward him, and her eyes shone with a strange, quiet kindness. "You shouldn't be awake," she said. Her voice was calm, almost like the Count's, though lighter, smoother. "I heard a song." He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. "Yes, the castle sings sometimes. It remembers. It calls those who listen." Her eyes moved toward the ceiling, as though listening again to something only she could hear. "Are you part of it?" Her smile lingered. "We are all part of it. Everything that lingers, everything that stays. You'll understand in time." Her form shimmered faintly, like candlelight through fog. Jonathan blinked, and for a moment she seemed to fade, then return again, softer, less solid. He took another step, drawn forward by something he could not name. But the air shifted. A low sound filled the hall, deep and soft, like a slow rolling note, like a sigh from the earth itself. The woman turned her head sharply, her expression changing. The calm on her face wavered, replaced by a flicker of something else. Fear. "He's awake," she whispered. "Who?" The woman's gaze lifted to the shadowed ceiling, her voice dropped to a hush.
the master of the castle. Go back to your room." Before Jonathan could speak, the mist around her began to dissolve. Her form grew fainter, thinner, until she was only light. Her voice lingered in the air, fading like a sigh. "He does not like the night disturbed." And then she was gone. Jonathan stood alone in the silver hall. The humming had stopped. The castle was silent again, listening. He felt the weight of that silence pressing around him, as though the very walls waited to see what he would do next. He turned slowly toward the staircase. The air felt thicker now, heavier. His footsteps echoed softly as he began to climb, one step at a time. Each step seemed to take longer than the last, as though the stairs stretched endlessly upward. When he finally reached the top, the corridor looked different. The light had dimmed, the moon's glow weaker, as though the night itself had deepened. He found his door again. It was open, though he remembered closing it. The candle on his table had gone out, the wick thin and cold. Jonathan stepped inside and sat on the bed, his breath steadying. He looked toward the window. The clouds outside drifted slowly past the moon, painting the room in soft gray light. And there, on the floor near the door, was something new, a faint mark. Two long lines side by side, pressed lightly into the wood. He bent down, tracing them with his fingertips. They were smooth, shallow, and strange. He sat back, unsure whether to think or dream. His mind was heavy now, his eyes warm with sleep. He lay down once more, the sheets wrapping around him like quiet waves. The wind brushed the curtains, whispering softly through the cracks in the stone. He closed his eyes. The castle's rhythm returned, slow, steady, endless. Somewhere far away, a door creaked open, then closed. And then, in the deepest stillness of the night, a voice, low and calm, murmured just outside his door. "Sleep well, Jonathan. The house remembers you." The sound faded like smoke, leaving only the silence of the castle, breathing, dreaming, waiting.
Chapter 5. The Breakfast of Shadows. Morning arrived quietly, though Jonathan could not tell if it was morning at all. The light that entered through the tall window was pale and silver, not golden as it should have been. It filled the room gently, like water seeping through lace, soft and cold. For a long time Jonathan lay still, listening to the hush of the castle, the slow breath of stone, the faint sigh of the wind through cracks unseen. He could not remember falling asleep. The memory of the night came to him in pieces, a voice humming, a woman made of mist, the echo of footsteps that might not have been his own. Each fragment drifted through his mind like smoke. Had he dreamed it? He was not sure. The air smelled faintly of iron and earth, and somewhere far below he thought he heard the sound of a door opening and closing softly, as if the castle itself moved in its sleep. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, the linen sheets whispering around him. Outside the window, the mountains stood still, wrapped in gray mist. Not a single bird stirred. It was as if the world had paused to listen. On the small table beside the bed sat a tray. He hadn't noticed it before. There was bread, fresh and soft, and a cup filled with dark red liquid. Steam rose from the cup in thin ribbons that curled upward and vanished. He blinked in surprise. No one had knocked. He had heard no footsteps. Still, the breakfast waited, silent and perfect. He rose, his movements slow, the floor cool beneath his bare feet. The castle seemed to hum faintly beneath him, the same slow rhythm he had begun to recognize, the pulse of its hidden heart. He sat at the table, touched the cup, and felt the warmth seep into his fingertips. "Strange," he murmured, "how silent everything is." He lifted the cup, sniffed the liquid. It was thick, sweet, and dark. Not wine, not tea. Something about it was ancient, familiar, as though he had tasted it long ago in some half-forgotten dream. He drank a little, and warmth spread through him immediately, soft and deep, curling through his chest like comfort itself. Then a voice spoke from the doorway. "You are awake early." Jonathan turned. Count Dracula stood in the doorway, tall and still, dressed in deep black that caught the faint light and shimmered like silk. His face was calm, his expression polite, his eyes dark as polished glass. "Good morning, my friend," said the Count softly. "I trust the night treated you kindly." Jonathan hesitated, setting down the cup. "It was restful," he said, "though the castle seems to dream as I sleep." The Count smiled faintly. "Yes," he murmured, "it does that. Old places remember the breath of those who walk within them. You may have heard its memories." He stepped into the room. His movements were smooth, almost floating. The light seemed to bend slightly around him, dimming as he approached, though not enough to notice at first glance. Jonathan watched him, fascinated by the quiet power that seemed to follow him like a shadow that listened. "I took the liberty of having breakfast sent to you," said the Count, his tone almost tender. "You must keep your strength. The air here can take more than it gives." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Thank you. The food is unusual, but good." The Count's eyes glimmered faintly. "Ah, you have good taste." They sat together, the Count at the far side of the small table. Neither spoke for a time. The castle's silence wrapped around them both like a blanket. The sound of the Count's voice, when it came, was low and deliberate, each word a smooth ripple across still water. "You must forgive the strangeness of this place," he said.
Few come here now. The world beyond the mountains moves too fast for old walls to keep up. Jonathan smiled faintly. I find it peaceful. There's a kind of music in the quiet. Indeed, said the Count, that is what drew me here long ago. A silence that holds rather than empties. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes deep and calm. Tell me, Jonathan, do you dream often? Jonathan hesitated. Lately, yes, though I'm never sure when they begin or end. The Count's smile deepened, though gently. That is the way of this house. Dreams and waking are not enemies here. They share the same breath. The words made him feel suddenly sleepy, as though the Count's voice carried weight heavier than sound. He blinked, his gaze drawn to the flicker of the candle between them. The flame bent slightly, as if bowing to the rhythm of the Count's words. The Count rose, his hand brushing the edge of the table. When you have finished, come to the library, he said. It is time you saw the heart of my home. Then, as softly as a shadow, he turned and left. The door closed behind him without a sound. For a moment, Jonathan sat motionless, his mind fogged, his breath steady and slow. He could still feel the warmth of the Count's presence lingering in the air, like the afterglow of music. He finished his meal in silence, then stood, straightening his clothes. The corridor outside his room seemed longer than before, stretching into a gentle haze of light and shadow. The castle had changed again, subtly, but undeniably. What had been narrow and stone-gray now seemed vast, glowing faintly, as though it had absorbed the morning light. Jonathan followed the faint hum he now recognized, the quiet pulse that guided him through the halls. At the far end, tall wooden doors stood open, revealing a room filled with golden dust and soft and shifting air. The library. He stepped inside. Rows and rows of books climbed the walls, reaching all the way to the high arched ceiling. Ladders leaned against the shelves, and sunlight, if it was sunlight, filtered through the windows in thin silver beams. Dust motes danced slowly in the air, turning as if to some silent rhythm. Jonathan inhaled deeply. The scent of old paper and candle wax filled the room, calm and clean. And there, in the middle of the great space, stood Count Dracula. He turned as Jonathan entered, his dark coat trailing lightly behind him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the endless shelves. "Every story here has been waiting to be heard again." Jonathan nodded, stepping closer. "It's magnificent. How long did it take to collect all these?" The Count smiled, his gaze drifting to the ceiling. "Longer than you would wish to count. But time is generous if you learn to move slowly." He ran his hand across the spine of a book, his fingers barely touching it. "These are voices from the past, sleeping. When you read, they wake. if only for a little while. You'll find that even stories breathe if you listen long enough. Jonathan felt something stir inside him, a quiet awe, a sense that the Count spoke of more than books. He reached for a volume nearby, its leather cover smooth but cool. As he opened it, a soft whisper of air escaped, as though the story inside exhaled after a long rest. The Count watched him with that same small, knowing smile. "Be gentle with them," he said. "Some have slept for centuries." Jonathan read a few lines, the letters curling across the page in elegant script. He didn't recognize the language, but the rhythm of it, the flow of the words, made him feel calm, almost drowsy. The Count's voice came again, softer now, closer. "Do you see?" he whispered. "The past is never gone. It waits beneath the surface, patient and alive." Jonathan closed the book and looked up.
Chapter 6. The Voice Beneath the Floor. The whisper had faded, but its echo still trembled in Jonathan's chest. The air around the narrow crack in the wall was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and candle wax. He stood very still, listening, the silence of the library pressing against his ears. Nothing moved. The hum beneath the floor had grown quiet, waiting. He ran his hand along the edge of the opening. The wood was warm, as if touched by breath. He could hear nothing now. No voice, no pulse, only his own heartbeat, steady but slow. And yet some part of him knew the whisper had not been a dream. It had spoken his name with care, like someone who had been waiting a long time to be heard. Jonathan looked over his shoulder. The great hall of books stood silent, the dust still dancing in the pale light. Count Dracula was nowhere in sight. The thought made Jonathan's skin prickle, but not with fear. Something inside him wanted to know more. He took a candle from the table and touched it to the flame of the nearest lantern. The wax caught quickly, the small fire glowing soft and gold. He held it out in front of him and leaned into the opening. The spiral staircase wound downward, each step carved of stone smooth as bone. "Just a look," Jonathan whispered to himself, but even he didn't believe his own words. He stepped inside. The air grew cooler as he descended. The candlelight flickered, throwing long shadows on the walls. Each step echoed faintly, repeating itself in slow, hollow waves. After a few turns, the whisper returned, so soft he almost thought he imagined it. "Jonathan." It came from below, stretched thin by distance and time. He paused, holding his breath. Then, quietly, he kept going. The stairs led him to a narrow tunnel, arched and low. Roots hung from the ceiling like strands of hair, dripping faint moisture. The hum of the castle surrounded him again, deep, slow, and rhythmic, like the heart of something vast and patient. As he walked, he began to notice faint carvings on the walls, lines, symbols, names written in strange, looping letters. Some were carved deep, others only scratched, as though by trembling hands. He traced one with his fingers. The stone was cold,
but the grooves felt warm. It read, "I listened too long." He swallowed. The whisper came again, softer now. "Help me." The tunnel widened slightly ahead. A faint red glow shimmered from beyond the curve, like light beneath water. Jonathan moved slowly toward it, candle trembling in his hand. The passage opened into a low chamber, round, silent, and filled with the smell of damp earth. In the center stood a stone basin, wide and shallow. Inside it, a thick, dark liquid rippled gently, though no air stirred. It glowed faintly from within, like blood remembering fire. Jonathan stepped closer. The hum was strong here. He could feel it through the floor, through his bones. The liquid shimmered again, and then he saw it. His reflection, blurred and pale, staring back up at him. But behind his reflection stood another shape, a woman. Her face was thin and soft, her eyes wide and endless, filled with sorrow. Her lips moved soundlessly, but Jonathan could hear her voice, not in the air, but inside his head. "Please, don't drink. Don't listen. Don't stay." He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the candle. The flame quivered, but did not go out. The woman's image flickered and vanished, leaving only the slow pulse of the glowing liquid. "Who are you?" Jonathan called, his voice shaking just slightly. No answer, only the hum. He turned, ready to climb back up the stairs, but the tunnel behind him seemed longer now, the shadows thicker. He took one step forward, and the hum changed tone, deeper, heavier, almost angry. Then from the darkness behind him, footsteps, soft, slow, steady. Jonathan turned sharply, candle raised. At the edge of the glow stood Count Dracula. He looked calm, but his eyes were darker than before, so deep they seemed to swallow the light. He did not move closer, not yet. "You have found the lower heart," said the Count, his voice low, gentle. "Few ever do." "I heard a voice," Jonathan said. His voice. "Yes, the house speaks. It remembers those who walk within it. Sometimes it calls to those who listen too closely." "Who was she?" Jonathan asked, his words trembling. For a long moment, the Count did not answer. His gaze drifted to the basin. Then he spoke, softly. "Once she was a guest, like you." Jonathan felt his skin grow cold. What happened to her? The Count's eyes lifted to meet his. She forgot which world she was in. The hum deepened, the red light pulsing faintly. Jonathan took a slow step back, the candlelight flickering between them. "You should not be here," said the Count, still calm, but his voice now carried weight, the kind that pressed against the air. "Then why does it call to me?" The Count's expression softened. "Because you listen, and the house loves to be heard." He stepped closer, his presence cold and still, like midnight standing upright. "Come," he said gently. "The morning will fade soon,
You need rest." Jonathan hesitated, then slowly nodded. Together they climbed the spiral steps, the candle flickering low. The hum softened with every step, retreating into silence. When they reached the library again, the pale light from the windows had dimmed, almost gray. He turned to speak, but the Count was gone. Only the faint scent of dust and roses lingered. He stood there, breathing slowly, the castle quiet once more. The whisper had stopped, but its echo still moved inside him, soft and deep, like the tide beneath sleep. He placed the candle on the nearest table, its last drop of wax melting into silence. The hum returned, faint and steady, matching the rhythm of his heart. And as he turned to leave, he heard, very faintly, beneath the hum, the sound of something moving again below the floor. Not a whisper this time, a heartbeat. Slow, steady, growing stronger. He backed away, but before he reached the door, he heard one last thing. Soft as breath, warm against his ear, though no one was near.
Chapter 7. The Dream of the Mirror Room. Jonathan woke slowly, as though rising through water. His eyelids felt heavy, his breath soft and steady. The world around him shimmered faintly, blurred by morning light that did not quite feel like morning. For a long moment, he could not tell whether he was still dreaming. The ceiling above him was white stone veined with silver. The walls curved gently outward, smooth as glass, and where he expected to see corners, there were none, only reflections. He sat up slowly, his heartbeat quiet, his breath fogging faintly in the cool air. Mirrors surrounded him. Tall, thin panels stretching from floor to ceiling, each reflecting his image over and over again. He saw himself multiplied 10, 20, 100 times, each reflection softer, dimmer, quieter than the last. When he moved his hand, they all moved with him, like a silent choir of shadows. The air was very still. Not even dust stirred. He rose to his feet, bare toes brushing smooth marble. Each step echoed faintly, though no sound returned from the mirrors. He spoke softly. "Hello?" His voice was swallowed by the glass. No echo, no reply. Jonathan's reflection stared back at him, but something about it was strange. He leaned closer, studying the face in front of him. It looked like him, but calmer, colder, almost older. The eyes were still, too still, like painted glass. And when he touched the surface, it was cool, but not hard. His fingertip sank just slightly into it, as though the glass were made of mist. When he pulled back, the reflection smiled faintly. Jonathan's breath caught. He hadn't smiled. He took a step back, his reflection remaining still now, watching him with quiet, curious eyes. Then, in the mirror to his left, another figure appeared, tall, thin, wrapped in the shimmer of black cloth. The Count. His reflection stood among Jonathan's, perfectly still, though there was no sign of him in the room itself. Jonathan turned quickly, but the space behind him was empty.
When he looked back, the Count's reflection had stepped closer. "Good morning, Jonathan," came the voice, not from the air, but from inside the mirrors themselves. It rippled softly, like sound moving through water. "Where am I?" Jonathan asked, his voice low. "In the house's memory," said the Count. "It keeps dreams here, yours and others." Jonathan swallowed, glancing around. "Why am I here?" "You wandered too deep," said the Count. His voice was calm, gentle. "When one listens too closely, the house begins to listen back. It wants to know who you are." Jonathan frowned. "It feels like a dream." "Perhaps it is," said the Count. "Or perhaps dreams are only doors we walk through without noticing." Jonathan's reflection began to change. The face grew pale, then younger, his own but as a child, then older again, lined, tired, and still. Each face faded into another, flowing like ripples in water. He felt dizzy, but the air was soft, soothing, impossible to fight. He watched his reflection blink slowly, as though it were falling asleep standing up. "Why does the castle do this?" Jonathan whispered. "What does it want?" The Count's reflection tilted its head. "It wants to be known. Everything that lives must be remembered, and this house remembers everything. The walls, the air, even your breath." Jonathan looked around. "And the woman? The one who called to me?" A pause. The Count's voice softened as if remembering something distant. "She was kind, too kind. She gave her heart to the silence, and it sang her name until she became part of it." Jonathan's reflection blinked again, slow and out of rhythm. Then it began to speak, not with his voice, but with hers. "Help me," it whispered. "Wake up." He stumbled backward, heart pounding softly against the quiet air. The Count's reflection stepped closer, though he could still see only glass. "Do not fear what you see," the Count said. "You are only dreaming what the house dreams of you." The mirrors around him rippled, their surfaces trembling like silver water. The faces inside them blurred, then began to move on their own, some smiling, some weeping, some turning away. He could feel them watching him from inside the glass, 100 eyes breathing in time with his own. He closed his eyes. "This isn't real." The Count's voice surrounded him, soft as a sigh. "Reality is only a door, and tonight it's open." The air changed. The floor beneath him softened as if the marble had turned to mist. He felt himself sink, weightless, calm, as though falling through a slow, endless dream. The mirrors faded into light, the reflections dissolving like dust and water. Then suddenly, silence. He was lying once more in his bed. The room was still, dim and quiet. The candle beside his bed had burned down to nothing. Jonathan sat up, breathing softly, his hands trembling only a little. The castle was calm again, no hum, no whisper, only the faint rustle of wind. He swung his feet to the floor and stood, feeling the coolness of the stone beneath him. Everything seemed normal, but when he looked toward the tall mirror by the wall, His reflection was not where it should have been. He stared. The mirror was empty. Only the room reflected, his bed, the table, the pale morning light. No Jonathan. He took a step closer. The surface rippled once faintly, then slowly his reflection began to fade in, smiling faintly before he did. Jonathan's breath caught. He turned away, steadying himself, telling his heart to be calm. But deep down he could still feel the echo of the dream, the way the Count's voice had flowed through the mirrors like water, the way the house had breathed his name. He whispered quietly to the empty air, "Whose dream is this, mine or yours?" The castle didn't answer, but somewhere behind the walls, faint as a heartbeat, something stirred, soft, slow, patient, listening.
Chapter 8. Letters that Write Themselves. Morning came softly, if morning it truly was. The castle had no clocks, and the light through the curtains never seemed to change, only drifting between silver and gray. Jonathan sat at the small wooden desk in his room, the ink bottle open, the paper before him blank and still. He took a breath. The air smelled faintly of iron and old flowers. Outside, the wind sighed along the stone, humming its endless song. He dipped his pen and began to write. My dearest Mina, I hope this letter finds you in the calm of summer. The weather here is strange, cool even when the sun should shine, and the air hums as though alive. The Count remains a most gracious host, though I rarely see him by day. The castle is vast and empty, yet I cannot shake the feeling that I am never alone. He paused, tapping the pen gently against the desk. The ink shimmered faintly in the pale light, still wet, almost breathing. He smiled to himself, a little embarrassed by his own unease. He leaned forward again to continue, but froze. The pen was still in his hand, and yet the next line appeared on the page without him touching it. He watches as I sleep. Jonathan stared. The words were written in his own hand, his same careful script, but his fingers had not moved. A small tremor passed through his arm, and the pen slipped from his grasp, rolling to the edge of the desk. He waited. The page stayed still. The silence in the room grew thick. Then, slowly, more words began to form, dark ink bleeding through the paper from nowhere. I am writing to you from tomorrow. He whispered, "No," but the ink kept flowing, curling in elegant, steady strokes like a living thought. Do not look at the mirror again. Do not listen when the house calls your name. He is kind until he remembers what he is. Jonathan's breath trembled. He reached forward and pressed his palm to the paper, trying to stop the writing, but the letters continued beneath his hand, burning faintly warm through the page. He tore the sheet away, crumpled it, and tossed it into the small fireplace beside the desk. The paper curled and blackened, the words twisting in the heat,
until they vanished in smoke. For a moment, everything was still. Then, softly, the pen began to move again, by itself, sliding gently across a fresh page. Jonathan didn't touch it. He watched. He knows you read this. Smile when he enters the room. Jonathan's pulse quickened. He turned sharply toward the door. The handle moved, slowly, quietly. The door creaked open. Count Dracula stood there, tall and calm, his face smooth as marble. "Good morning, my friend," he said, his tone as gentle as ever. "I hope you slept well." "Yes, quite well, thank you." Jonathan forced a small smile, his throat tight. The Count's eyes drifted to the desk. "You write letters each morning, yes?" "Yes, to my fiancée." "How lovely," said the Count, stepping closer. "Does she answer?" "Not yet. The post is far, I think." The Count smiled, deepened slightly. "Yes, the distance between hearts can be long indeed." He moved to the window, gazing out at the gray light. Jonathan watched him silently. The Count's reflection did not appear in the glass. "You look pale," said the Count softly, turning back to him. "Perhaps you should rest today. The house can be heavy for new minds." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I think I will." The Count inclined his head. "Good. Sleep often. Dream kindly." He left as silently as he had come, the door closing without a sound. Jonathan stood frozen for a long moment, listening to the echo of those last words. Then he turned slowly back to the desk. The paper lay blank again. The pen sat perfectly still, a tiny drop of ink trembling at its tip. He reached for it, hesitant, and turned the paper over. On the back, faint as breath, new words had appeared, almost invisible, as if whispered by the ink itself. "You smiled just in time." Jonathan's hand shook. He dropped the page and stepped back, his heartbeat slow but heavy. He looked around the room. Everything seemed ordinary. The chair, the curtains, the faint sound of wind. Yet the air had changed, as though the walls themselves had been watching. He went to the window, opening it a little. The air outside was cold and clean. Far below, the mist rolled over the valley like a sleeping sea. He breathed deeply, trying to steady his thoughts. From the desk behind him came the faint scratch of movement. He turned. The pen was writing again. "Don't look away now." Jonathan froze, every breath caught between fear and disbelief. He stared at the page as new words appeared, quick and sure, written in that same steady hand. "He's still here." The room felt suddenly colder. The open window whispered faintly, though no wind touched his face. He turned back toward the door. It stood closed, still and silent. He looked again at the desk. The pen had stopped. The ink had dried. He waited, but nothing else moved. The silence returned, calm and complete, wrapping the room like soft cloth. He sat on the bed, breathing slowly, letting the quiet sink into him. Maybe it was the castle's way of speaking again, its strange, dreamlike way of remembering everything at once. Maybe he had fallen asleep while writing. Maybe none of it was real. He looked at his hands. They were clean, no ink, no tremor. And yet, across the back of his left hand, faintly written, as though beneath the skin, he could see letters forming, slowly, softly, in dark, thin lines. It will write again when you sleep. Jonathan closed his eyes. The room breathed with him, soft and rhythmic. The pen stayed still, but somewhere deep inside the walls, a quiet scratching continued, faint as a dream remembering itself.
Chapter 9. The Night Corridor. The candle had gone out hours ago. Jonathan slept lightly, the way one floats between waking and dream. The castle breathed around him, a slow, endless sigh. Then something changed. A sound, soft as fabric drawn across stone. He opened his eyes. Darkness, but not still. The walls seemed to shift, almost pulse, as though they were stretching after a long rest. He sat up, listening. No wind, no footsteps, only a gentle murmuring, low voices threading through the dark like water under ice. He rose quietly from the bed. The floor was cool, and when his feet touched it, the murmuring grew a little louder. He could not tell if the voices came from beyond the door or from inside the very stones. He whispered, "Who's there?" The answer came from both directions at once, his own name, spoken softly. Jonathan. One voice ahead of him, one behind. He swallowed. The air was calm, not cruel, like being called by someone who once loved him. He moved to the door, opened it slowly. The corridor waited, long, silver, endless. Yet something was different. The shape of it bent gently, curving away into shadow, and the walls no longer stood straight. They leaned, breathing, as though listening. Jonathan took one candle from the wall. Its flame sprang up, soft and golden. The light ran ahead of him, painting the stones with warm, sleep-colored glow. He began to walk. Every step echoed twice, once real, once delayed, as if the corridor were remembering how to answer him. The portraits on the walls had changed. Last night they were soldiers and nobles. Tonight they were faces he knew. Mina, his childhood friend, his own reflection, half smiling. He stopped, heart slow and heavy. The painted eyes followed him, gentle but alert. He whispered,
"It's a dream." The voice from behind answered, "Then wake." He turned. No one stood there, only the long hall stretching backward, the candlelight trembling against polished stone. He walked faster. The whisper ahead moved with him, always just around the next bend. "Jonathan, this way." The tone was kind, familiar, the same soft voice he had heard beneath the floor, the woman who once called for help. He followed. Each door he passed looked the same, tall, locked, silent. Yet the corridor itself began to shift, gently at first, then clearly, the walls breathing inward, closing the distance. He could hear the faint rhythm again, the heartbeat of the house, slow, patient, steady. The candle flame leaned forward, drawn by invisible wind. He rounded the corner and froze. Ahead, the corridor split into two identical paths, each one bending into darkness. From the left came his own voice, from the right, the woman's. He lifted the candle. The flames flickered between them, undecided. Both voices spoke again in perfect rhythm. "Come with me. Come back." He stood there, uncertain which was real. He could feel the house listening, waiting. He took a slow breath, trying to still the tremor in his chest. Then he chose. The right-hand path, the softer voice, the one that sounded like sorrow. The corridor curved inward. The whisper guided him closer, closer, until the air grew warm and the walls seemed almost to hum. He followed the sound until it led him to a tall wooden door carved with moonlight patterns. He touched the handle. It turned easily beneath his hand. The room beyond was small and round, lit by a single lamp that glowed like captured dawn. In the center stood the woman from before, pale, still, her eyes full of quiet. "You shouldn't be awake," she said softly, the same words as their first meeting. Jonathan felt his throat tighten. He asked again, "Who are you? Why does this place call to me?" Her eyes drifted toward the walls. "They want to be remembered," she whispered. "Every voice that has ever passed through here leaves an echo. You are listening to us all at once." He took a step forward. "And you?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I am what's left when the echoes forget the beginning." Her form shimmered, half light, half shadow. Jonathan reached out, but the air between them thickened like water. "Why do you stay?" he asked. Her voice thinned, becoming almost song. "Because he dreams through me." She looked toward the door. "He is coming." The candle in Jonathan's hand fluttered. The flames stretched long and blue. He heard it then, the slow, measured tread of footsteps somewhere beyond the corridor. "Go," she whispered, "or you will dream where I dream." The lamp dimmed. The air grew cold. Jonathan turned, hurried back into the corridor. The two paths were gone.
There was only one now, straight and narrow, leading back toward his room. He walked quickly, his footsteps barely touching the ground. Behind him, the footsteps followed, slow, certain, echoing without sound. He reached his door and stepped inside. The room looked just as he had left it, still, gray, waiting. He closed the door softly and leaned against it, listening. The footsteps stopped outside, on the other side of the wood. Silence. Then a whisper through the keyhole, low and close. You chose correctly. Jonathan's breath trembled, but a strange peace settled over him. He set the candle down. Its flame burned steady, calm again. He lay on the bed, the sheets cool against his skin. The castle hummed its slow, endless lullaby. He closed his eyes and drifted. In the quiet between waking and dream, he thought he heard two heartbeats, his own and another just behind the wall, both beating in time.
Chapter 10. The Morning That Never Ends. When Jonathan woke, the light was soft and gray. He thought it was dawn, but the air was still. No birds sang, no wind brushed the windows. He sat up slowly, listening. The castle felt different, lighter, almost expectant, as if it too was holding its breath. He went to the window. The valley below lay silent, wrapped in silver mist. The forest looked pale, asleep under a spell. The sky held the color of waiting, not sunrise, not night, something between. He whispered, "It's morning." But the word did not echo. It fell softly and was gone. He dressed, his hands slow and careful, as though not to wake the air. When he opened his door, the corridor was straight again, calm, still, ordinary. No whispers, no voices, only the faint sigh of wind that might have been his imagination. He walked. His footsteps were soft, steady, rhythmic, a heartbeat beneath the silence. He felt that if he stopped, the castle itself might forget him. As he reached the main hall, he saw a long table laid out with bread and wine. Steam rose gently from a silver cup, and there, sitting at the far end, was Count Dracula. The Count smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, but as though he had been expecting this moment for a very long time. "Good morning, Mr. Harker," he said. His voice was smooth and low, like water sliding over stone. Jonathan bowed his head slightly. "Is it morning?" he asked. The Count looked toward the window where the mist still floated, unmoving. "It is what morning wishes it could be, the beginning without the end." Jonathan hesitated. He felt both peace and fear inside him, twin rivers moving in the same direction. The Count gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit," he said gently. "You have walked the corridors. You have heard their voices. You are no longer a stranger to this house. Jonathan sat. The bread was warm beneath his fingers. The wine shimmered dark red, catching the soft light like a heart in sleep. Dracula watched him with steady eyes. "You have seen what few have lived to tell," he said. "You have heard the echoes of what we were before time forgot us. Tell me, what did they whisper to you?" Jonathan met his gaze. "They whispered your name," he said quietly, "and they whispered mine." The Count nodded slowly, pleased. "Then you understand. We are both prisoners of memory, you of your daylight, I of my endless night." He stood, tall and graceful, his shadow stretching across the floor like a river of ink. "Do not fear this place, Jonathan. The castle does not hate you. It merely keeps what it is given." Jonathan's voice trembled. "And what have I given it?" The Count leaned close enough that Jonathan could feel the chill of his breath. He said, "Dreams, and dreams are more faithful than flesh." He turned toward the window. The mist outside began to shift, rising, swirling. It wrapped around the castle walls, veiling the world beyond. Jonathan looked out, but there was no valley anymore, no forest, only mist, endless and calm. Dracula's voice softened. "Perhaps you will leave this place. Perhaps you already have. The line between waking and sleeping is thinner here than most believe." Jonathan's eyes grew heavy. The wine was warm in his chest, slow and deep. He blinked, and the Count seemed to fade a little, like someone stepping behind a curtain of dream. He heard the low hum of the castle, the same heartbeat rhythm that had followed him since the first night. Now it sounded gentle, almost loving. He whispered, "Am I dreaming?" Dracula's voice came faint and distant. "Does it matter? All dreams lead to the same door." The air thickened. He felt weightless, drifting. He thought of Mina, her smile, her letter folded in his coat. He wanted to hold on to her image, but it shimmered like water, rippling away. He stood. The chair behind him disappeared into mist. The Count was gone. The hall was empty. Only the sound remained, the pulse of the castle, the hush of the walls. He followed the faint line of light that led toward a door he had never seen before. It stood slightly open, golden brightness spilling through like liquid morning. He walked toward it. Each step was slower, softer, lighter. His heartbeat began to match the rhythm of the house. The closer he came, the warmer the light became, gold turning to honey, then to sleep. He reached out, his hand brushing the edge of the door. A soft voice, the woman's voice, whispered behind him, "You're awake now." Jonathan smiled faintly, though his eyes were already closing. He stepped through, and just before the light folded around him, he heard the sound of wings, one soft beat, then another, echoing like breath. The mist drifted back slow and tender, wrapping the castle in silence. The door faded, and the morning stayed, still gray, still waiting, still forever on the edge of dawn. Somewhere deep inside the castle, the echo of a heartbeat continued. 2 beats, soft and steady, dreaming together. And then all was quiet.